Welcome back to a new episode of Wheels of History. Before telling you everything about today's protagonist, we invite you to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one. For you, it's just a small gesture, but for us, it is essential to continue sharing the stories of men and machines that have marked an era. Today we tell you the story of the first Laverda, the Laverda 75 Campagnola. Post-war Italy was a country undergoing a transformation. The land, which for centuries had dictated the economy, began to give way to factories, and the roar of tractors started blending with that of motorcycles. Even in Breganze, where Laverda was synonymous with agricultural machinery, the winds of modernity were blowing strong. Francesco Laverda sensed this, and decided to embark on the adventure of two-wheelers. And so, in 1950, the first motorcycle from the Venetian company was born. A small 75cc four-stroke, compact and sturdy, with a stamped sheet metal frame that set it apart from the competition. It was a pioneering debut, but with a significant advantage. Laverda, already known and appreciated in the rural world for the reliability of its machines, enjoyed a level of trust that other brands could only dream of. For those who had used a combine harvester or a tractor from Breganze, transitioning to a motorcycle bearing the same name was almost natural. Thus, the Laverda 75 earned the nickname Campagnola, loved by those who lived and worked among fields and hills. However, in a fast-moving Italy, a good reputation alone was not enough to stand out. The small displacement market was crowded. Moto Guzzi with its Gusino, Aramere Capriolo, Ceccato Ducati, fierce competitors that left no room for the uncertain. Laverda knew this and chose the most direct path to make a name for itself: competition. The touring version of the 75 was a robust, economical, and reliable motorcycle, but it was the sport version that made history. Victories followed one another with such regularity that it would be more accurate to speak of a monopoly rather than mere success. Milano-Taranto, regularity races, road competitions, Laverda was always in the lead, asserting a technical dominance that ignited the passion of those who rode it. Yet even those who didn't race benefited from the quality of the Breganze company. Both the touring and sport versions shared the same engine, a small technical marvel for its time, a four-stroke with a light alloy cylinder head and barrel, overhead inclined valves, and a hemispherical combustion chamber that allowed the single-cylinder engine to run smoothly, even beyond the 5,200 revolutions per minute, declared for maximum power. The frame, initially made of stamped sheet metal, was soon complemented by a tubular double-cradle frame that made the bike even more competitive. At first glance, the lightweight motorcycle appeared unusual compared to the standards of the time. The stamped sheet metal frame and the tapered fuel tank mounted on the inclined beam gave it a distinctive look, as if it had originally been conceived as a moped with an open frame, only to be later adapted for a more motorcycle-like stance. However, stepping over the frame remained somewhat cumbersome. Its success was mainly due to the engine, lively, fuel-efficient, and ready for tuning. Francesco Laverda wanted the best available technology and spared no effort in refining its design. The head and cylinder were made of light alloy with a cast-iron sleeve. The valve system featured inclined overhead valves and a hemispherical combustion chamber, solutions usually found in much more prestigious motorcycles. The bore measures 46 mm and the stroke 45 mm, with a slightly over-square configuration that allows the engine to run at high RPM without strain. The maximum power is reached at 5,200 revolutions per minute, but the small 75 eagerly revs well beyond that. The initial compression ratio is 6.51, but the shape of the combustion chamber allows for further increases without difficulty. The robustness of the engine makes it an excellent platform for enthusiasts looking to modify and tune it. In fact, as early as 1951, 4 examples competed with honor in the Milano-Taranto race and also stood out in regularity competitions. One of the most interesting features of the engine is its valve timing system. The 2 camshafts are positioned on separate shafts inside the crankcase and are driven by 2 pairs of gears. The exhaust camshaft is located behind the cylinder on the right side, while the intake camshaft is in front, on the left side. The valves, set at a compact 60 degrees angle, are returned by helical springs. The rocker arms, with a simple yet effective design, operate on a bolted-on rocker support. The crank mechanism is equally robust. The crankshaft has an 18 mm diameter coupling shaft pressed into the flywheels and supported by ball bearings. The carburized connecting rod works on full roller bearings, while the small end houses a bronze bushing for the 14 mm piston pin. The piston, with a flat head and lateral reliefs, is equipped with 2 compression rings and 2 oil scraper rings. The lightweight alloy crankcase is split vertically into 2 halves, as are the covers. On the left side of the crankshaft, there is the ignition breaker and an oil pump that draws from a 1-liter sump. On the right side, a flywheel magneto directly powers both the ignition and lighting system. In later versions, the headlight would receive power from a battery charged through a rectifier. The spark plug is a Magneti Marelli CW 225A. The fuel system is managed by a Dell'Orto MA15B carburetor. The primary transmission operates through gears with a 2.75:1 ratio and drives a multi-plate wet clutch. The 3-speed gearbox is of the dog clutch type. The gears are always in mesh, and selection occurs by locking the desired gear using a series of sliding pins. While the engine is the Laverda 75 strong point, the frame raises some concerns. The sheet metal structure ensures high rigidity, perhaps too much, while the suspension leaves much to be desired. The front parallelogram fork performs adequately, but the rear suspension, with an internal leaf spring and linkages, is less convincing. It is stiff, noisy, and the frame itself amplifies sounds, turning them into an unpleasant metallic echo. The wheels are interchangeable and fitted with 24 x2 and 1/4 tires, while the drum brakes have a diameter of 140 mm with 20 mm brake shoes. The motorcycle weighs 70 kilograms and has a wheelbase of 1,190 mm. The stated performance includes a top speed of 60 km/h, which soon increased to 70 km/h, with a fuel consumption of 60 km per liter. In 1952, a transport tricycle appeared using the same stamped frame. But the real turning point came with the sport version, presented at the Milan Fair that same year. The frame became a tubular double cradle, the front fork was now telescopic, and the rear swing arm adopted shock absorbers with springs. The engine, increased to 4 GP at 6,500 revolutions per minute, pushed the small 75 up to 90 km/h with the right gearing. At the Milano-Taranto race, this version left its competitors far behind. The little Laverda changed its look. The Campagnola was born, featuring sheet metal leg shields and a telescopic fork replacing the old parallelogram design. The same frame was also introduced on the Normale at the end of the year, and on both versions, the engine received minor updates, gaining a slight boost in power while still maintaining the 3-speed gearbox. Even the base version received the new frame and suspension, while the old stamped frame survived only on a variant with large leg shields, which disappeared the following year. In 1954, the Campagnola was phased out, but the small single-cylinder engine from Breganze continued its evolution. From the 75 came a 100cc version, which soon joined the original model in races and on the streets, further establishing Laverda's name as a symbol of robustness, reliability, and an indomitable spirit. As often happens, the public ended up focusing on the most prestigious version. The 75 Normale, also called the Campagnola, remained in the shadow of its sportier sibling, despite being a practical, economical machine suited for everyday riders. Its distinctive design and open frame made it resemble another icon of the era, Moto Guzzi's Galletto. Thus, it earned the nickname Laverda da Prete, Laverda for priests, as its frame allowed riders to mount it without lifting their cassocks too much. But beyond the labels, the 75 marked the beginning of a glorious adventure. With it, Laverda laid the foundations to become one of Italy's great motorcycle manufacturers, and if first loves are never forgotten, the Campagnola remains in the hearts of those who rode it, with its quiet rumble and the determination of a machine that knew how to carve its path, from the countryside to the city. This is where we stop for now, and as always we remind you that engine spare parts and rubber components for Laverda and other vintage motorcycles can be found at thekingofficeton.com. The wheels keep turning and the stories remain. Every motorcycle tells a journey and unveils an era. See you at the next stop, always on 2 wheels and with another piece of history to tell.